The air was cold and still, so silent that even breathing seemed to reverberate. It was December 1950 in the frozen mountains of North Korea. The cold was a deadly -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and snow enveloped everything in all directions. For the 15,000 U.S. Marines surrounding the Chosin Reservoir, they were stuck in an Arctic wasteland. But what they didn't know is that both were headed for a deadly trap, one that would put their courage, strength, and will to survive more than ever before. The Marines had been advancing north, feeling sure of their mission to drive back the North Korean forces. But when they got to the Chosin Reservoir, something didn't seem right. Second, higher command had denied reports of Chinese troops in the area. They wouldn't dare, the officers said. But down on the ground, the Marines could sense it, an ominous tension in the air, a feeling of being watched. Then, on the night of November 27, it went silent. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the hills surrounding the reservoir. From its snowy foothills, thousands of Chinese soldiers lying in wait in the snow and shadows launched a surprise assault. The Marines faced an enemy force nearly 10 to 1. The Chinese forces encircled them, shutting down resupply routes and trapping them in the bitter cold wilderness. It was the stuff of a waking nightmare. The first night was chaos. The Chinese soldiers charged in waves, screaming out war cries up the mountains. The Marines fought back fiercely, but their greatest enemy was the cold. Weapons froze up in the bitter cold, and frostbite took fingers and toes. Men wrapped rags around their feet to prevent freezing, but this was never sufficient. The snow became stained with blood as the fighting continued. By morning, things looked bleak. The Marines had run low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The wounded were accumulating, and the cold was unforgiving. But retreat wasn't an option, not yet. The Marines knew they would have to hold their ground at all costs. They had to dig into the snow, pitching makeshift foxholes and defensive positions. It was a time when men could not afford to complain, and they soon learnt it well. They all knew that it was a matter of survival, and that nothing would sustain them better than activity. The drill of teamwork, the weariness of sheer effort. The fighting continued for days. The Chinese troops hit hard, but the Marines would not yield. They fought with what they had: grenades, bayonets, even their bare hands when necessary. The cold was so brutal that the dead froze where they fell, and their bodies became part of the landscape. It was a scene of unfathomable horror, but the Marines held firm. Then came the order that was a game changer. We're pulling out. The decision to pull back was not made lightly. With the encirclement, they knew if they wanted to live, their only hope was to break out. But the road to safety was fraught with peril. They would have to carve a path through miles of enemy-held territory, all while protecting their wounded and carrying their dead. The surrender started on the 6th of December. The Marines formed a convoy, tanks and trucks in front. The injured were loaded onto vehicles as the able-bodied marched alongside, rifles at the ready. The Chinese forces were intent on preventing them, staging ambushes and blocking roads with barricades. It was a fight every step of the way. One of the most harrowing moments was at a narrow mountain pass called Hellfire Valley. The Chinese had laid an ambush, and the Marines were blundered into a deadly crossfire. Bullets flew overhead, and explosions lit up the night. But the Marines didn't panic. They engaged with precision and valor, their armor blasting open the enemy wire. It was a tough battle, but they survived. With the convoy rolling, the Marines had more work. The chilling temperatures made it hard to move, and the hurt were in distress. But the Marines were not about to leave anyone behind. They bore their comrades on stretchers, sometimes for miles, through a landscape of snow and ice. It was a simple motto: no man left behind. At last, after 17 days of constant fighting and unbearable toil, the Marines arrived at the port of Hungnam. They had traversed 78 miles of perilous ground, all while subjected to recurring attack. Of the 15,000 troops who had begun the journey, almost 3,000 were killed or wounded, but they had survived. They had beaten the odds and escaped the frozen hell of the Chosin Reservoir. It became a storied battle, a symbol of bravery and endurance. The siege at Chosin Reservoir. The The Marines who fought there were heroes, the story of the battle a testament of the human spirit. They had fought against overwhelming odds and triumphed, reminding us all that in the darkest of moments, hope and resolution can ultimately win. If you were inspired by this story of bravery and survival, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, and that there are countless untold stories of heroism just waiting to be told. And with your help, we bring them to life. And thank you for reading, and we'll see you in the next story.